We've got quite a few people coming in.
So I can wait just a second, or we can call the meeting to order and start the video, or can we do all that at one time, Terry? Because we have a pretty packed agenda.
Just let the last two.
Okay.
Go ahead and get the video rolling.
Okay, thank you. So we're calling the meeting to order of the Authority Board, and will please join me and give your attention to this short video.
Terry Ann, I can't play the video. This is Lindsay.
You know what? Neither can I. Let me see. It's not
Every meeting I've been in this week has had problems. So
you know, my documents are going.
It's Mitchoff.
I think I got it now.
There we go.
All right.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTV website.
Neither can I.
Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should remute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. A 30-second warning will be provided. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the COVID-19 Special Notice for Public Comment Guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. And Terry Ann, will you please call the roll call? Please conduct the roll call. I'm ready to start voting.
Commissioner Arnrich is absent. Commissioner Butt?
Here.
Commissioner Glover?
Here.
Commissioner Haskew?
Here.
Commissioner Hudson?
Here.
Commissioner Mitchoff?
Here.
Commissioner Nowak?
Here.
Commissioner Thorpe? Don't believe I saw him come in. No. Commissioner White?
Here.
Representative Allen? Didn't see her out. Let me let Mark Foley in here as a co-host. Representative Foley?
Here.
Thank you. Representative Powers? Did not see her either. Representative Worth? I did not see either. So we've got Representative Allen, or sorry, we have Foley here for Allen. Powers and Worth are absent. And right now we have Commissioner Arnrich and Thorpe absent.
Okay, and Vice Chair Kelly and Chair Geringer are present. I don't think.
Oh, my apologies, Vice Chair Kelly.
Okay. It's okay. It's okay. Welcome
Chair
back, everyone.
Geringer.
Welcome back, everyone. From our, I hope everybody enjoyed their meeting off last month. So, and now the next item on the agenda will be our Pledge of Allegiance, and Commissioner Mitchoff is going to lead us in that. And so I ask that everyone else please mute your microphones and join Commissioner Mitchoff.
Thank you. Do we have a flag to show? If not, we all know what a flag looks like.
There's
Please
one
join.
behind Holland.
There we go. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchoff and Commissioner Hudson, for raising the flag for us. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is for public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda, but still within the purview of the authority board. And so, Terry Ann, if anyone wishes to make a public comment, please raise your hand and Terry Ann or I will call on you. And we'll give you a second. I don't see any hands raised.
I don't have any written public comment and I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you. And thank you for making sure I asked for the written public comment. So now we'll move on to, we do not have any presentations this evening, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. And I will ask the board if anyone has any changes or comments on the consent calendar items. And or does anyone want to pull an item?
Move consent.
Is there, thank you, we'll hold that for just a second. Is there anyone from the public who is joining us today who would like to comment on or remove an item from consent? Please raise your hand. And not seeing anyone, I have a motion from Commissioner Hudson. Do I have a second?
I seconded it. Nowak.
Oh, okay. So in the second from Commissioner Nowak with a really close behind from Vice Chair Kelly. So Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Butt,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thor, still absent, Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioners Arnridge and Thorpe absent.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Terry Ann. And now we'll move quickly to agenda item 8, and we will have an update from the, excuse me, I'm going to start over. We're now moving to our regular agenda items, agenda item 8A, and we're going to get an update this evening from Stephanie Hu on the State Route 4 Design Alternative Assessment Study. So Stephanie, take it away. And I believe we have Mark Thomas, members from Mark Thomas here.
Yes,
Can you-
and they are presenting their slides. I trust you guys can see it like I can. So good evening, everyone, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Hu, Director of Project CCTA, and this item 8A is an information item to provide you all an update on the Design Alternative Assessment, or DAA, on State Route 4. I'd like to just take a moment to introduce our consultant team, David Williams from Mark Thomas, and Ron Ramos from Fear and Peers, who are here this evening to present this item with me. Next slide. So I'll provide a quick introduction and overview, and then the consultant team will be presenting on the details of the study and findings. Next slide. So MTC and CCTA partnered in funding and development of this DAA. The goal of the study is to identify, screen, evaluate, and prioritize various managed lane concepts for Highway 4 that can be implemented by 2030, and also concepts that can address congestion issues for the corridor and meet the needs and support potential long-term improvements for the corridor. We started the DAA in middle of 2020. The study limits are from 684 Interchange and Hillcrest Avenue. In addition to CCTA and MTC staff, our consultant team, in addition to them, a technical advisory committee was formed for this DAA, which included all the local jurisdictions along Highway 4 within the project limits, as well as transit operators and Caltrans. We met with the TAC group 4 times during the life of the study. Next slide, and I'll hand it off to David Williams from Mark Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. So the main issue that we looked at as part of this study was the congestion. It's the current congestion and the future congestion. In the morning peak, it's in the westbound direction, and in the afternoon peak, it's in the eastbound direction. So we went through an initial identification of concepts. Let me see if I can get rid of that. There we go. We came up with 11 initial concepts that we went through a screening process on. We identified various screening criteria that we applied to each of these alternatives. We brought that down to 6 viable alternatives that we then took into an additional study with traffic. And based on those results, we've come up with 4 prioritized options to advance to formal studies. When we looked at managed lanes, we looked at types of options that included HOV, express, and also contraflow. So a little bit more detail on each of the alternatives. The first one is purely an HOV lane. It's adding a second HOV lane in the shoulder in both directions of State Route 4 in the mainly congested area. It would maintain HOV 2+ occupancy. There's also an eastbound auxiliary lane that we would add at Bailey Road. The second one is taking the existing HOV lanes, converting those to express lanes. They would still be 2+ occupancy, which is what's out there today. And once again, we'd add a second express lane in the median shoulder for a portion of the segment. The third alternative is we would take the existing HOV lanes, convert those to express lanes, but change the occupancy from 2+ to 3+, and it would still be a single express lane. And then for all these managed lane alternatives, we also looked at opportunities for park and ride lots in the study area. So I'll go into a little bit more detail. What's shown on screen is the HOV option. With this option, we'd add that second HOV lane in the eastbound direction from just east of 242 up to Bailey Road. And once again, we would have this additional improvement of an auxiliary lane at the eastbound Bailey Road on-ramp. In the westbound direction, we'd add that second HOV lane in the shoulder between Railroad Avenue down here up to just west of Willow Pass Road, where the existing HOV lane ends today. The estimated construction costs for this in current dollars is 30 to 36 million. This is not a revenue generating type of project. The second one is the double express lane. So it's converting those existing HOV lanes to express lanes. For this alternative, we'd add a second express lane in the eastbound direction from just east of 242, this time up to Railroad Avenue. And in the westbound direction, the second express lane would be from Railroad Avenue to just west of Willow Pass Road. This construction cost goes up. There's a lot more infrastructure that needs to be put in. So the cost for this goes up in the range of $100 to $135 million. There is a toll system integrator associated with express lanes. They are like a third-party contractor. They actually put in all the equipment for the toll system. So they also have costs associated with them of 30 to 35 million. But this is a revenue generating type of managed lane alternative. The next one is the single express lane, where we just take the existing HOV lane that's out there, convert it to express lane, but change the occupancy from 2+ to 3+. With this, the cost is less than the previous one just because there's less infrastructure we're putting in. So the costs are in the $65 to $90 million range. Toll system integrated costs are a little bit less, 25 to 30 million. But once again, it's revenue generating type of project. In terms of park and ride lots, we work closely with the various transit agencies as part of the technical advisory committee. We looked at various existing park and ride lots and planned park and ride lots. There's one existing in Brentwood. There's planned ones in Oakley and Antioch, these orange circles. We also looked at opportunities for potential future ones along the corridor, which are identified by these blue circles. These types of improvements could be part of any type of managed lane alternative. It would sort of complement anything we do along the corridor. Finally, just as part of our study, we looked at future planning. We work closely to look at opportunities to enhance existing transit service in the corridor. We also looked at what we call integrated corridor management type strategies. There's been previous studies that have looked at this in more detail, but some of those strategies may blend well with some of these managed lane concepts as we take these projects into the next phase of project delivery. With that, I will hand it over to Ron Ramos from Fear and Pierce, who's going to talk a little bit more about the traffic analysis that we did. Thanks. Ron, are you on mute by any chance?
Good evening, everyone. It looks like now finally I was able to unmute. I'm Ron Ramos with Fear and Pierce. What we see on the screen is the comparison of the alternatives from an operational perspective related. The measure of effectiveness to see here is the travel time. The no-bill alternative is on your left side of the screen. And what we can see here is that the double HOV express lane provides some travel time savings compared to the no-bill. When we introduce the express lane concept, we're able to save a little bit of extra time as we are able to put additional vehicles on the managed lane. Now, we are presenting two results for the HOV3 express lane concept. Why? It's a little bit of uncertain at this point how people are going to react to the express lane and the amount of space that we can backfill. This alternative is removing the HOV2 occupancy, HOV2 users, as they will be paying reduced fees. So some of them will remain, some of them will leave. What we can see is that when we are able to backfill with 15% of the capacity, meaning pay toll users on the managed lane, the travel time increases. And of course, if we add some more mode shift into the managed lane, the travel time will decrease slightly, but will still be higher than the no-bill conditions. If we move to the next slide. Now here what we're comparing is a vehicle and person hours of delay. Similar to the travel time results, the double HOV2 managed lane reduces the peak and the person hour of delay. We introduce express lane concept and we are able to reduce it further. And the managed lane at a HOV3 express lane will increase the hours of delay. Comparing between the two of them, the 25% will be less. If we move to the eastbound approach, the eastbound travel time with the double HOV lane will reduce quite significantly on the eastbound approach, but we also need to consider, as David mentioned, that this alternative have an auxiliary lane implementation that reduces quite significantly the travel time. If we don't have the auxiliary lane, but we introduce the express lane concept, the travel time is still significantly reduced, but a little bit larger compared to the double HOV2 only with the aux lane. Similar than the westbound conditions, we're presenting two results for the HOV3 single lane express lane managed lane. The 15 and the 25% will be higher than the no-bill, with the 25% concept being slightly lower. Next slide, please. And then here, when we see the vehicle and person hour of the lane, the double HOV2 plus, as I mentioned, it basically reduces all the delay on the eastbound approach, mainly due to the auxiliary lane. And the next alternative, the double HOV2 express lane alternative, has some delay because there has to be some delay for people to use the express lane, but it's significantly less than the no-bill conditions. The single HOV3 express lane for both alternatives, 15 and 25% mode shift, will be higher than the no-bill, with the 25% being slightly lower. And now I turn it back to Stephanie. Thank you.
So, so for next steps, so we saw through the slides earlier that there are some benefits to the double HOV lanes and double express lanes. So we'll need to do a more comprehensive analysis with better modeling tools to really confirm these analysis results, especially the factors about mode shift, how many cars we can effectively shift their modes to make the express lane successful. But beyond that, I think for now, for next steps, we're finalizing our DA report and we'll coordinate with MTC to see if there are any near-term opportunities or strategies to advance these viable concepts. And again, with more comprehensive modeling and analysis. But at a higher level, a vision for Highway 4 is really needed in order for us to implement improvements for the corridor with a corridor-wide approach, kind of similar to what we're doing for Innovate 680. So staff will be taking into account the studies that have been done and then those that are currently going on. So currently the East County Integrated Transit Study and the Travel Behavior Study are underway. And then with the new requirements for SB 743 and VMT, we will need to do a more comprehensive corridor approach to implement projects that can collectively tackle GHG and VMT reduction and mode shift that can also be complementary to operational improvements, since we know this corridor experiences heavy congestion even during the pandemic. So staff will take the results for all these studies that we have and help us form a vision for Highway 4 moving forward. And with that, that's our last slide, and we'd be happy to take any questions or comments you guys may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you to our consultant speakers, David and Ruben. I'm right now having a brain thing here. Ron, thank you, Ron Ramos. Thank you very much for the presentations. Do we have any comments or questions from the board before we move to public comment? And I see Commissioner Hudson raising his hand.
That or I was trying to swim. On slide 10, because there was so much of a difference, I just wanted to ask the question and get it out of the way. The difference in pricing was 3 overpasses, if I remember correctly. I mean, there's no way we could use the shoulder. I mean, we definitely have to redo those overpasses if we took that alternative. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, what's happening in that area is the shoulder's still pretty narrow at those 3 bridge locations. So to be able to widen, we'd have to do like sliver widening of those bridges to get a wider shoulder in there. Once we get past those existing bridges and we start to get more into where BART has come into the median, then there's more, the shoulder's a lot wider all the way up through the limits to the east.
Okay, well, let me give you part B of it then. Are these overpasses that we've already redone or they're new? We're not going back and doing something again that people are going to say, why in the heck didn't you do it the first? I mean, are these older, probably should be redone? I want to call it the Norris Canyon HOV on-ramp, off-ramp model, but what are they, David? I mean, it's probably a good thing to do it anyway if it's an option we take.
Yeah, it's like with any improvement, codes change in terms of, what you do with bridges as you go through, projects over periods of time. We'd have to evaluate that in more detail as you went into the next phase of project delivery. But there has to be some type of widening to support the option. Otherwise, you'd have to do some sliver widening on the outside. It's probably more cost effective to widen those bridges on the inside median area.
Yeah, I'll defer to Transplant, see what they want to do.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from authority board members? Commissioner Glover and then Commissioner Nowak.
Thank you. One of the things that's happening is that we're running out of road. I mean, putting in new lanes are just not going to be our reality. And so, trying to find transit systems, I think is the way that we have to go, because it's just not any more roads. So, and we see that development is going to be pretty high, especially with the naval weapons coming in and some other projects that are being looked at that are high density projects. So I know that that we're looking at roads, but other means of transit getting out of there is going to be very important also. BART can't be the only game.
Thank you, Commissioner Glover. And Commissioner Nowak?
Well, I made the comment at APC, and I guess I'm going to add a little bit to what Federal was talking about with the Naval Weapons Station. When you do those more detailed analysis, taking those new volumes into account, because when I look at the difference in traffic benefits of the HOV2, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to spend $100 million more when the time differential is negligible. So it'll be interesting to see if the more detailed study makes a bigger difference, because right now it doesn't look like there's a significant enough difference to be spending an additional $130 million.
Thank you. So anyone else from the authority board? I'm not seeing any virtual or real hands flying about or being raised. So I will now open it for public comment from members of the public. I do see one hand raised. We'll just remind everyone that if you would like to speak, raise your hand or turn on your camera and raise your hand, and Terry Ann and I will try to see you and recognize you. But Dave from Bike East Bay, welcome. So Terry Ann, did you intend to start? Go ahead, Dave, and welcome. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay. Good to see your faces after the summer recess. To add to Supervisor Glover's comment, yes, more transit on the corridor, and want to ask that we look at how getting people to bike to transit is going to be helpful to get people out of their cars and onto that transit. In particular, getting people to bike to the transit stations along this corridor and to the park and ride lots. That would help a lot. We are looking forward to working with CCTA staff on the mobility hubs and how they can integrate into this type of planning for the 680 corridor. We need to be doing the same for this corridor. And I'm very involved in projects to improve biking to the Hillcrest BART station, now the Railroad Ave BART station, and the Pittsburgh Bailey Road BART station. We've got the Hillcrest Road one. We've got some improvements out there, and I thank CCTA staff for helping make that happen. I now need help at Railroad Avenue because the designs there are leaving bikes a block away from the transit station and no safe way to get in there. And we still have work to do at the Bailey Road station. And so I will be having those conversations with Pittsburgh, and we'll be looking forward to CCTA's help. I'm not asking for your help here on those projects, but it would help those projects and those conversations to know if we can build those better bikeways to the transit stations along this corridor, how can it help this planning effort right here to reduce congestion on the corridor? I don't have those numbers or that information. But that would definitely make the work we're doing on the ground at these specific transit stations much more effective if we had that number. So I just want to encourage you to dive in there and give us answers to the questions of how many people do we need to have biking to these transit stations? How many people do we need to have biking to the park and ride lots? And what kind of facilities do we need to be building to get them to do that? Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dave. And then are there any others who have, I see Laura Nakamura. Laura, welcome. And
good evening. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I think, Terry Ann, that we have a spotlight on Dave Campbell.
That's fine.
And Laura, thank you.
Spotlight,
Sorry,
Dave.
I'm adding.
And Laura, you have 10 more seconds or 11. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Laura Nakamura. I am a longtime Concord resident. I'm a member of Bike Concord, and I live close to the Concord Pavilion. And so when I look at these schematics, and anything that happens on Highway 4, I instantly think of what happens. The impacts on Highway 4 notoriously in the morning affect what happens on Crooker Pass and Ignacio Valley Road. An accident can just reroute all sorts of traffic in, and that's what started my road to commuting by bicycle to Walnut Creek. So sometimes I can make it faster in my 10-mile commute on my bicycle than I can by car because of what happens on Highway 4. I would be, I know that Commissioner Nowak made a great point about the amount of money and the incremental change that it gives to people in vehicles. And I think that money would be better suited towards what Dave was talking about, bikeways, getting people towards public transit, but also much more frequent and reliable public transit along the routes, especially Crooker Pass, Ignacio Valley Road, just trying to get people out of their cars. I don't think that building bigger roads is what we need to be doing for sustainability in the region. I think that we need to be thinking much more forward thinking to just replacing cars if we can at all costs, and not adding more lanes and incentivizing people that in a way that says, oh, look, there's more lanes. Let's just get more cars out here. We all know that the impact of the naval weapons reuse project is going to add the amount of a small city, 13,000. And so we have to be thinking differently. We can't just be adding lanes. We're running out of road and shoulder, and it's just not sustainable in my eyes. And I thank you for talking about this tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for Thank you, Laura, and thank you for coming. Are there any other members of the public who would like to share their comments and insights? And I'm not seeing any additional raised hands, and any further comments from authority board members. Seeing none, thank you again, Stephanie, David, and Ron. And we will move on. And Terry Ann, thank you for running all of the logistics of keeping the timing and everything. So we will move on now to the next agenda item, which is an action item presented by Hisham Noemi to discuss the overall approach and development schedule for the 2020 Measure J strategic plan. So Hisham, welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. I do have a presentation. Let me share my screen. Hopefully you can hear me and see the presentation fine.
I can, at least.
Okay,
so I assume
thank you.
Can.
So tonight we are asking you for your approval to kickstart the process for the 2022 Measure J strategic plan. My presentation today will focus on some of the factors that will shape this update as outlined in the staff report. We are now in year 12 of Measure J since it became effective on April 1st, 2009. We still have 13 more years to go before it expires. The Measure J expenditure plan guides how we spend our Measure J funds. It assigns funding to specific projects and programs. And as you can see in the pie chart, about 57% of the funding goes to programs like on an annual basis, like bus operations, local streets maintenance, and so on. While the remaining 43% goes to pay for capital projects. It also pays for debt service and program management costs. The expenditure plan unfortunately doesn't tell you which projects to do first, doesn't set priority, or how to deal with revenue declines like the one we had in 2008, or how to pay for bonding costs when we issue bonds. That's why we do the strategic plan. The 2022 strategic plan will be the 7th update since the first one you adopted in 2007. The board committed to update the strategic plan every 2 to 3 years to revisit assumptions on revenue growth, debt service costs, and issued bonds, and cash flow needs. While our focus is on the next 5 years, we keep an eye on what happens at the end of the measure 13 years from now. The goal is to ensure our commitments do not exceed our revenues. 6 months after you adopted the 2019 strategic plan, we had to deal with COVID-19. There was a lot of uncertainty on what it will do to the economy and our revenues. We held back on our expenditures, suspending appropriations to local projects. I'm pleased to say that over the past 3 years, we actually ended up having $17.6 million more in revenue than what we projected in the 2019 strategic plan. This year, we were also able to restructure our debt, eliminating the swap and replacing our variable interest notes with fixed rate bonds. This should save us about $5.5 million in debt service costs. We also have successfully managed to use the allocation plan as a tool to fund some of our Measure J projects with other fund sources. That saved us another $6.6 million. And last but not least, the 2 largest construction contracts we awarded recently are now nearing completion. These projects are the 680 southbound HOV express lane, as well as the 684 phase 3 improvements. At this time, 2/3 of Measure J projects are either constructed or under construction. And so far, we have spent 90% of Measure J revenues that are programmed in the 2019 strategic plan, even though we still have 13 more years to go before the measure expires. Those projects added $2.4 billion to Contra Costa's economy, and they brought in $1.7 billion in other fund sources. Today, we are asking for your direction on several factors that will shape the 2022 strategic plan. The most important factor is the revenue forecast. And as I mentioned, despite COVID-19, our revenues for the past 3 years were $17.6 million higher than what we were projecting in the 2019 strategic plan. The biggest surprise was this fiscal year. We just got this data a couple of weeks ago. For the first time, our annual revenues exceeded $100 million, and they grew at the fastest pace since we started collecting data in 1990 when Measure C started. HDL did our forecast for the 2019 strategic plan. They are a reputable firm who specialize in this type of work. We asked them to update their projections for the 2022 strategic plan. And Susie from HDL will provide the details behind the revenue forecast at the end of my presentation. This chart shows our revenues since 2004 when the voters approved Measure J. It shows the decline that we had during the Great Recession between 2007 and 2010 and the recovery period afterwards. It also shows the dip that we had last year because of COVID. The red line is what the 2019 strategic plan was projecting our revenues will be. And the solid green line is the new HDL baseline projection that we are proposing to use in the 2022 strategic plan. The chart shows our revenues exceeding the projections for the last 3 fiscal years. It also shows, for your information, the conservative as well as the optimistic scenarios that HDL developed. As you can see from the slope of the solid line, the black or green solid line, the new HDL baseline projections assumes slower growth rate compared to the 2019 strategic plan projections. Our average growth rate moving forward will be 3.3% compared to a 4.6% that we were assuming. All three scenarios assume a decline in our revenue next fiscal year, as you can see. This table shows the amount of revenue under the three different scenarios and compares them to the revenue projections in the 2019 strategic plan. The new baseline shows that we will have 2.588 billion over the life of Measure J. This is the same amount that the 2019 strategic plan was projecting. The conservative scenario shows we will be $73 million less than the baseline. And the optimistic scenario shows we will have about $119 million more. Staff is recommending adopting the baseline scenario for the development of the 2022 strategic plan, with the understanding that the revenues for the next 2 years under the baseline scenario and the conservative scenario are exactly the same. So we are being conservative in the short term, which is something we want to do. We will be looking at the forecast again in 2 years when we do the 2024 strategic plan. So we will have another opportunity to adjust if things don't go the way we are projecting. The next factor is the allocation plan. As you recall, in May 2020, the board suspended Measure J appropriations to the remaining projects in the strategic plan, as well as the TLC and the BitBike programming documents. At the time, we didn't know how bad things will get with COVID-19, and we wanted to slow down our expenditures in preparing for the worst. At the same meeting, you directed us to prioritize future Measure J appropriations by developing the allocation plan. After working with the TCC and the Regional Transportation Planning Committees over the next several months, in February 2021, you approved the allocation plan. The plan basically ranks the remaining 32 locally sponsored projects and the 11 authority managed projects in a way that maximizes the return on our investment. At the same meeting, you approved basically, you authorized the resumption of Measure J appropriations to the top 14 projects in the allocation plan in order to protect approximately $54 million in other fund sources. At this time, there are still 18 projects on the allocation plan that have not yet been authorized to receive their Measure J appropriation. Given our Measure J revenues did much better than what we anticipated, we are ready to recommend the resumption of Measure J appropriations to all remaining projects in the allocation plan. This will eliminate unnecessary delays to these projects and give them certainty about their funding. If you agree, we will be seeking your approval to revise the resolution that suspended the appropriation at your next meeting in October. Let's talk about the programming window. Every time we update the strategic plan, we add 2 to 3 years to the strategic plan time horizon. The 2019 strategic plan looked out to 2025. We are recommending that you extend the horizon by 2 more years to 2027, so we can match other programming documents such as the 2022 STIP. In the 2019 strategic plan, the board authorized maintaining a $2 million reserve to deal with the unforeseen cost increases on authority managed projects. We are recommending that you augment this reserves with savings from completed Measure J projects. This will ensure that we have enough funding to deal with cost increases on projects or unexpected revenue declines. If it turns out that the reserve is not needed, you always have the ability to program those funds to specific projects. Without having such a reserve, basically if we end up with another unexpected revenue decline, we will have to take funding from projects that you already committed to. This is not something anyone wants to do. And we will come back to you once we complete our analysis of the strategic plan to determine how much savings we are talking about and what amount to set in the reserve. In terms of the schedule, we're looking to complete the strategic plan by July 2022. With that, I want to turn it to Brian and Susie from HDL to give you the details behind the revenue projections. I'll stop sharing my screen. Brian?
All right, thank you very much, Hisham. I'm going to share my screen here. We're going to do the HDL presentation. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Brian Keller. I'm the CFO for CCTA, and as Hisham was going through the entire discussion, one of the major components in our financial forecast is looking at HDL sales tax projections. And Susie Woodstock from HDL worked exclusively with myself, and we also used the experts at HDL, and we came back and we met with Hisham and Tim and went over the presentations. And so what Susie's going to do is quickly go through where we are and what changed and how we got to $107.2 million in the last year during the pandemic, and how we're going to treat some of these businesses and other sales tax paying entities moving forward to create our 3.5% increase as we move through the year. Susie, are you with us?
Yes.
Beautiful.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Like Brian said, I'm Susie Woodstock with HDL. We'll start here looking at your half-cent transaction tax. This is a half-cent that applies to all the sales that in the county allocated by where the goods are delivered or placed into use. One of the big differences in this transaction tax versus regular sales tax is automobiles. It applies to where the automobile is registered versus the dealership where the car was sold from. So it's slightly different than the regular Bradley Burns. We can go to the next slide. And I'm going to talk in adjusted information. The cash that comes from the state can be delayed, it can be double payments, it can have missing payments. It does not reflect the actual sales for each quarter, but when we're projecting forward, we want to look at the actual sales for the quarter or the year. So the adjusted is when we put the dollars back into the quarter when the sale applied. Next slide. This is the base major industry groups in the county. General consumer goods is 32.5% of all the sales in the county. The second biggest group is autos and transportation, and the third biggest group is business and industry. And we talk in terms of these major industry groups because we cannot talk in terms of individual businesses or anything that would give away the confidentiality of those individual businesses. So these are lumped together. And I'm going to just kind of touch on these three big groups because they're kind of driving some of how the overall projection is going. Next slide, please. So first, general consumer goods. General consumer goods is consistent of brick and mortar and the online sales. They are combined into one category for the transaction tax. In 2019, we had AB 147 that implemented that marketplace facilitators and businesses that generate more than 500,000 from out of state had to register and start paying California sales tax. Previously, they did not. The big portion of this started in October 2019, and it took a year to implement. So it was really good timing that we had all this new revenue coming in at the same time the pandemic hit. So we don't see the pandemic dip in these numbers because we had that new revenue coming in, and it came in much higher than we would have expected this out-of-state revenue and marketplace facilitator to come in. But we did have the pandemic hit. We had temporary closures of some of these businesses, and that did slow the brick and mortar portion. If we go to the next slide, this is looking at what happened during the pandemic. You can see we shifted from spending on services, which were not taxed, to an increase in goods. So not only did we have that new revenue coming in from AB 147, but we had new revenue because people were buying more goods, and a lot of this was happening online. So those two things are causing a little bit of a spike in spending right now in general consumer goods. We're not going to see it just drop off. People are not tending to just stop, but as we transition back to a more balanced spending, traditional, more services and not as much on goods, we'll see the goods slowing and the non-taxable services will increase. Next slide. And then the second biggest group was autos and transportation. This turned out to be a classic V-shaped recovery for the pandemic. We saw a very big dip in second quarter 20 when everything was temporarily closed. People were figuring out how to function in the pandemic, but it bounced back quickly. Prices are at an all-time high and cars have been selling off a lot. What we have is it's slowing a little bit because we are expecting this inventory shortage to slow down those number of sales that can happen. So they bounced right back. This industry really only dipped for that one bad quarter when we were in the shelter in place, and it has recovered fully since. And you can see going forward with the transition to electric vehicles and other types of switching over their cars every 7 years, people tend to buy a new car. We've got about a 4% growth going forward. Next slide. And then business and industry. Also do not see that big of a dip during the pandemic here. One of the bigger groups in this is medical biotech. And so even though a lot of those those businesses sell equipment for specialized surgeries, they also sell respirators and personal protective equipment that ended up offsetting. So we didn't really see a dip in this business and industry. Overall, this group tends to grow at about 3%, and you can see that's what the long-term projection is. Next slide. And here we get to the overall forecast. You can see at the far left, 2016-17 was about 87 million. And again, I am talking in adjusted numbers when we're looking here. So you can see the 3 years before the pandemic grew 3 to 4 million each year. And then we have the pandemic that only dipped down to 93 million. We were expecting it could have gone much, much further. So that was really good news that it was just down $1 million there. And then I've got the 101 highlighted for 2021. That was the projection that we had before we had the final data for the year. And even though the cash came in at the 107, the adjusted came in about 105. And that really is hitting on autos and transportation and general consumer goods. About 3 million of what came in higher here was related to those two categories that go back to that spike in spending that we're seeing. The other category that came in that's contributing to the 105 is building and construction. And we saw a big spike in lumber prices in that second quarter, the April, May, June period. Going forward, we've got it kind of normalizing back out to 102 for 21, 22, and then growing again at about 3.3 to 3.4% going out. And then of course the 33, 34 is the year that the measure ends. This forecast does assume that there will be no further COVID restrictions. That can affect some of those categories, not the ones that we kind of touched on, but some of the restaurants and fuel and service stations really were hit hard by the COVID restrictions. Overall, you can see the previous forecast was about 1.609, and now we're at about 1.592. And that's it. Are there any questions on the forecast?
Is that the end of the presentations, Hisham and Brian?
Yes, and one of the questions that came up at APC is what is the big dip at the end in 2034? So the strategic plan goes through March 31st, the Measure J goes through March 31st in 2034. So the whole fiscal year, which starts in July, ends. So you're losing one quarter, and that would be the dip, if that would be anybody's questions.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Are there any comments or questions from authority board members? That's really good news that the revenues are coming in much higher. So I see nodding of heads. We'll go to the public. And Terry Ann, have we received any public comments?
No, written public comment has been received.
Okay, and if there are any members of the public who would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand and you will be given 3 minutes to address the authority board. And I'm not seeing any on.
No hands raised.
Thank you. So thank you. We do need to take action. I need to go back to this. Action on the item. And so do I have any We have no public comments, no more authority board comments. Do I have a motion to approve the overall approach and schedule for the development of the 2022 Measure J strategic plan?
So moved.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
with it. Did you also want, there was bold type, Hisham, the approval to increase programmatic reserves? Is that part of the recommendation?
Yes,
Uh-oh.
sir. The recommendation will be to adopt the new HDL baseline for the development of the 22 strategic plan, increase the horizon by 2 years.
Okay.
Increase the construction reserve, and
I'm still second with you, Luella. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Although it doesn't speak really well for our ability to get people out of their cars because we're relying on that kind of income to meet our goals, but it is what it is.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Haskew and a second by Commissioner Hudson. Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Commissioner Butt,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchoff,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnridge absent.
Great. And thank you again to the presenters for this very good presentation and for moving this work forward. So we will move on to the next agenda item, which will be an informational item presented by Jack Hall to provide an update on the program status on Gomentum Station and the connected vehicle and the autonomous vehicle program. So Jack, welcome, and we look forward to hearing the update.
Good evening, Chair Geringer and Commissioners. My name is Jack Hall, CCTA's Connected Autonomous Vehicle Program Manager. And tonight I'll be giving an informational update on Gomentum Station, along with Matt Alfano. He's the Vice President of Mobility Innovation at AAA. And also thank you to Christina Ramos with Advanced Mobility Group. She's going to be running the slides tonight. And thank you, Christina. Next slide, please. So there are 4 main goals at Gomentum Station. One of the goals is to reduce congestion. And we feel that we can't build our way out of congestion by building more roads, and that new technology is the way that we're going to get people through traffic jams. Also, safety is a big goal. Vision Zero is part of it, and we think that other vehicles can't hit each other or hit pedestrians or bicyclists. So using technology for safety. Also, environment, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're really high on alternative fuels, working with those and trying to get those advanced. And also, we want to bring jobs to Contra Costa and compete with other states like Michigan and Arizona. So Gomentum Station is a public-private partnership. We're continuing to build outstanding relationships with the US DOT, the National Highway Safety and Traffic Administration, such as NHTSA, Caltrans, California DMV, MTC, the Air Quality District. We also have private partners like Verizon and Nissan, and we're also working with the University of Berkeley and other cities. Next slide, please. Actually, keep that slide. Sorry about that. If you could go back, perfect, thank you. The Gomentum Station is the old Concord Naval Weapons Station. Currently, the City of Concord Base Reuse Authority has a license with the US Navy to do work on the site. And then at CCTA, we have an MOU with Concord and also a sub-license with the US Navy. And then we have a cooperative agreement with AAA to be our managing partner. And AAA, their vision and mission aligns very well with CCTA's with a focus on safety and innovation. Next slide, please. So in the summer of 2016, we took delivery of 2 Easy Mile shuttles. They were made in France by Ligier Motors. We were the first to import these vehicles into the United States, and it was very difficult and a learning experience. We received a license plate from the California DMV, and we ran them on city streets out in San Ramon. And we ran into issues. We would try to cross Camino Ramon, and the vehicle it went through a valley gutter. It slowed down to a speed that wasn't able to cross safely. So we had to work with the traffic engineering department in San Ramon and try to hold that green signal. But the point there is that it's very good to test out at Gomentum Station before you hit the public roads. Next slide, please. So we transitioned to the Ollie shuttle by Local Motors. It's made in the USA. And it helped us receive 2 grants, the Mobility on Demand grant and the Advanced Driving System grant. And this is because of Buy America clauses. We started out with 2 Generation 1 vehicles, and now we currently have 2 Gen 2 vehicles made by Local Motors. Next slide, please. So the Mobility on Demand grant, it allows a traveler to use a phone app to plan and pay for your entire trip from origin to the destination and across different modes at one time. So hopefully that will encourage people to use different transit or micromobility. And we're working with BART on this project. Next slide, please. The other grant that we recently received was the Automated Driving System grant. And this grant there were 73 applications for the grant, and there were 8 selected applicants, and we're the only local agency. The other agencies that received these grants were state DOTs or universities. And quickly on the projects, there's 3 projects in our overall ADS grant. The first project is at Rossmore in Walnut Creek. It's an active adult community. And they have an existing shuttle service that runs between the community center, recreation center, and different points of interest in Rossmore. And we're going to bring the Local Motor Ollie shuttles and run on that route and give people an automated vehicle for transportation option. The second project is the County Hospital project. And again, this is we're going to provide another option for patients to get to the county hospital. And the county ran into issues with people not showing up for their appointments. With this automated vehicle option, we're hoping we can eliminate that. And then hopefully that project, if successful, we will expand that into the Pleasant Hill, Martinez area. And then the third project is the Personal Mobility on Interstate 680. And here we're trying to use technology to increase the flow and reduce congestion on Interstate 680. And we've also expanded that project into Danville, and Nissan is our partner on that. Next slide, please. So we'll run a quick video here. So this is the Dynamic Personal Mobility Microtransit. The company is named Glideways, and they are looking to, well, they have a proof of concept, and that's what we're looking at right here. This is at Gomentum Station. And one of the options that they're looking at is to run these micromobility, microtransit vehicles from the North Concord BART station to the Interpretive Center at the newly named Thurgood Marshall Regional Park. And also out in East County, they're looking at many options to get people to BART and other destinations. Next slide, please. So we received a $3.5 million grant from CalSTA, and then that was matched with $3.5 million from AAA for a total of $7 million. And this grant was spent and completed last year. With the grant money, we've resurfaced 340,000 square feet of pavement. We've installed signalized intersections and other traffic control devices, and there's roundabouts, all kinds of different scenarios that autonomous vehicles can then try to maneuver through. Next slide, please. And part of the grant was a signal lab. And that was what this does is most cities, the cities tend to have different vendors or manufacturers for their traffic controllers. And so the automatic or the autonomous vehicles have onboard units, and they need to be able to talk to these signals. And in fact, pre-pandemic, there was a Intelligent Transportation Systems California, ITS California conference in Anaheim. And they had a demonstration where they had 3 intersections in the city of Anaheim. They put attendees in a bus, and then they had a display on the bus. As the bus went through the different intersections, it would display the SPAT or signal phase and timing, basically the green, yellow, or red light. And as the bus was going through the intersections, it all 3 different displays were different. So one was saying green, one was saying red. And as they drove through the intersections, and the traffic engineer for city of Anaheim, he said, you know, typically we're looking at trying to make autonomous vehicles work across geographic boundaries such as countries or even states. But here, even in your own city, you need to make sure that this new technology works consistently. And so that's the highlight of the traffic signal lab out at Gomentum Station, where we can run different vendors in one vehicle and make sure that it's reacting correctly. Next slide, please. And then here's a video.
Gomentum Station, a private and secure 2,100-acre proving ground for connected and automated vehicles, conveniently located in Concord, California, 35 miles from San Francisco. We're the nation's largest closed-course AV test track with various environments for repeatable, automated vehicle testing. Engineers from OEMs and AV tech startups use our facility as an integral part of their development process to validate simulator results, perform safety operator training, and test NCAP scenarios and edge cases without risk to the public. Multiple distinct testing zones allow our customers to validate their AV stack in real-world scenarios with a variety of roadways, speed limits, and features such as railroads, city blocks, construction zones, and tunnels. Infrastructure features include programmable traffic signals, merge lanes, traffic circles, and bike lanes, making Gomentum Station an even more versatile space for closed-course testing. Most recently, our Vehicle to Everything, or V2X Lab, opened for traffic engineers to test their connected technology on our DSRC-enabled signals installed at 5 intersections. We also offer a range of automated vehicle testing services that can scale to the size and needs of your operation, including equipment rental, test plan development, engineering support, and result analysis. Gomentum Station is owned and operated by AAA of Northern California, Nevada, and Utah, and is part of our ongoing commitment to safety on the road by enabling the safe development and deployment of AVs. Whether you're testing commercial trucks, passenger fleets, or connected technology, visit us at gomentumstation.net today to see how we can help you meet your AV testing needs.
Thank you, Christina. And now Matt Alfano will be taking the next slides. Okay. Thank you, Jack, very much. Good evening, Chair Geringer and commissioners. My name is Matt Alfano, and I'm the Vice President of Mobility Innovation at AAA NCNU. Before I get into our slides, people usually ask me why AAA is involved in this business of autonomous vehicle testing. And our organization is really designed to be focused on member safety and member advocacy. And this is a really fantastic place to be at the forefront, or as I've stolen from Lindsay, have a front seat in that development. And our role is really to be a true neutral third party. So that we can bring together both the private industry and the public sector, and working with partners like CCTA to enable really a level playing field that cannot be monopolized by entities with deep pockets. Over the past 3 years, we've been able to, in fantastic partnership with CCTA, lay the foundations for an ecosystem that brings all of the parties together, particularly the parties that will eventually be assigned the land, and that includes Concord, the county, and the Parks District, as well as the private sector that is developing next generation mobility solutions. What we've been able to create is truly unique in that it is open to a wide variety of stakeholders and eliminates, again, the ability for one company to monopolize and really close off development and ecosystem building within AV and mobility. And as we discussed in the ABC committee, we are able to serve multiple goals with aligned solutions and programs. So the V2X Lab is a perfect example of that. That can be utilized by our the public partners in CCTA. It can be utilized by our private partners. And we're in constant communication with CCTA staff on grant work, programs that we want to, that we can mutually serve each other as we develop the testing facilities of the test bed. Now, you might be wondering what goes on a daily basis out at the facility. And the good news is that it's more than just personal autonomous vehicles. Yes, we do have those, but we are working with companies that are testing commercial autonomous trucking. We're working with companies that are testing short-term or short distance logistics, like pizza delivery. We're working with component suppliers that are putting in components into ADAS systems that are available in current and next year model vehicles. So these aren't technologies that we're gonna have to wait decades to see. We can see them on the roads in current safety systems that we see. We're also working sort of with, again, the discrete component manufacturers and really the testing providers, or I should say testing partners, to help create a rich ecosystem. So gone are the days of somebody having a full stack and doing it all themselves and creating all of their the test equipment and test scenarios. We're now able to bring in people from the ecosystem to have remote robotics be able to move a soft car around and have regulated testing that meets NCAP and NHTSA standards. It is both a mix of EV and internal combustion vehicles, but it is a great way for us to see what is coming from on the EV front as it looks at mobility. And I believe Jack mentioned previously, we work with universities on their research and development in this space. Next slide, please. So while we generally don't like to give a list of our testing partners because they do like the anonymity that Gomentum provides, we do love it when they talk about Gomentum in their everyday activities. So if we look at on the left, Aurora, who is doing the large trucking, they post about Gomentum on Twitter. In addition to a variety of road conditions and railroad crossings, we have livestock that provide real world conditions that Aurora was able to take advantage of. And then even on the right, we have Velodyne, who's on the opposite end of the spectrum. They're providing components in ADAS systems that and AV systems that manufacturers are producing. In the middle, we have a big one. It's actually Waymo and their Let's Talk self-driving program. So we really run the gamut of all types of AV vendors, or really mobility vendors in the ecosystem. And again, when they mention Gomentum publicly, we love to tout that. But I think one of the benefits we have in this relationship is that the companies that want to stay private under the radar, we have that ability, and it serves them very, very well. Next slide. One of the things that we track very closely is the utilization of zones on a daily and monthly basis. And we have 8 active test zones at the facility. And as you can see, in January 2020, we were at about 30 test zones per month. So that's about 1.5 per business day, which isn't exactly full utilization of the track. We had a dip in March and April 2020 due to shelter in place, where we closed the entire track down. And when we reopened with enhanced safety and social distancing measures, we were kind of wondering how quickly the partners would come back. And we were very pleasantly surprised to know that they came back very, very quickly to test and to test more frequently, to reserve more zones. We did have a second dip due to shelter in place. But really since then, if you look from January 2020 to today, it's a pretty steady growth line. Even this past month, past results for August, we were over well over 100 zone reservations. So we're busy, which is great, which is leading to some other things we're experiencing from a growth standpoint, we need to figure out how to have more zones. We need to figure out how to divide zone time. We need to make sure we have a managed calendar so that it's, or additional measures in our managed calendar so that it's fair. But the good news about this is when the partners started to come back, they weren't just coming back saying, hey, we just want more zone time. They came back saying, hey, we want more zone time. And here's what we want for the next generation of what this facility looks like. So this wasn't a, hey, we're here and we're not going to partner with you or be opaque about what their needs are. They're open with us and saying, here are the things we're going to need, not just for this year, but going into next year and beyond in the interim use for the facility that will keep them in Concord. And a key piece of that is in this time frame, we've had over 500 visitors come out to Gomentum. More than 20% of them have been there 6 times or more. So this isn't just one-off visits where people are coming and then they're never coming back again. We actually get to know some of the people that are testing there. I think that's important because they are currently commuting from areas outside of Concord and Contra Costa County. They don't want to do that for long. They want to establish a footprint in the county and in the Concord area that will help drive economic development. For these companies to drive from Silicon Valley on a daily basis, it's just not efficient. They want to be here. And we want to be able to give them a reason to be here with what we have planned for the future. Next slide. So I would like to address the $50 million elephant in the room that Tim Hale, the executive director, reminds me on a near weekly basis. In fact, he did it again today. And I fully understand the discussions that had when AAA became involved with Gomentum and CCTA. And we have a plan to make that a reality. And I think also we're taking the advice from Commissioner Arnrich. We are going to put together a strategic plan that outlines exactly how this will all work and really sort of what those commitments are. Now, how we like to look at this is really both the ongoing things that we at AAA do on a daily, monthly, yearly basis for general track upkeep and keeping our current partners happy. And the next slide, when we get to it, it'll be sort of what are we looking at for the future to make it really a world-class test facility. So examples of sort of the things that we do on an ongoing basis, we're upgrading the internet connectivity. We're managing that whole process. Our partners need both fast download, but really fast upload speeds. So when they do testing and they have big data sets, they don't have to go back to the office to get their engineering teams working on it. They can do it on site. We're continuing to work on semi-permanent equipment installation. V2X is actually a really great example of this, and another example of the mutual benefit of the programs that we have both with CCTA in the public and also in the private sector. We do general site improvements on a daily and monthly basis. We're working on our facility sharing right away and being good stewards with not only the Navy, but with Concord Parks in the county. And then we have requests for night and weekend testing and other such things. I think in this, AAA alone will invest about $2 million in CapEx this year alone on just these things. And that budget was actually set in December of last year when we had no idea what 2021 was going to look like. So we're committed to this, and we're committed to continue to make the investments on that on an operating and ongoing basis to drive again what we want to see for the future. Now, if we can go to the next slide. This is where we're going to get to the $50 million and how we're going to be able to partner with the private sector to do that. So we have a tremendous advantage, even during the interim use of this facility for the next 10, 15 years, to capitalize on just the sheer size of the facility. There's nothing else like this, really, not certainly on the West Coast, but probably in the United States, that can give 2,100 acres and a window into being able to do some unique things around AV, knowing that we have to work with Concord and the developer and county and parks to meet mutual goals. So with that, here's some of the list of things that we're looking for to create a more permanent presence and value add for our partners. So we're talking about on-site vehicle and equipment storage that will drive them to staff locally. We're going to need workspaces and micro labs. The firehouse is great. It's a great community place, but these companies are very secretive. They are going to want to be able to do development there in some form like that. We are going to want to put additional test features, whether that's a skid pad or a vehicle dynamics area. High-speed loop would be great. We're not going to put a Momentum, but those are the things we're getting asked for by our partners. They want different simulations for different conditions for testing. We want to have different road varieties for them. We want to essentially eliminate the need for them to go to Michigan or Arizona or Nevada for any of this testing. They should be able to do this here. And at some point, they will, 20, 30 years down the road, they will go to traditional vehicle dynamics area because they're testing the vehicles. From a typical shakeout standpoint, they want to make sure it doesn't rattle, squeak. But for now, they need to make sure it can behave the way it's supposed to behave, and Gomentum is the perfect place for that. And I think our challenge and our goals here are, we want to work with all the land partners and the master developer in this. And again, we have our marching orders for creating the strategic plan to capture exactly how and where all the dollars are going to come from. Next slide. So we've had a wonderful relationship with CCTA. Since I've been in charge of Gomentum from AAA standpoint, it has been a pleasure working with the executive director and staff on all of these projects. I think we have a tremendous amount of transparency in this, and we understand what we're trying to accomplish here. And it's been, it has unlocked, I think, a lot of the opportunities that we have and sort of the plans that we are brainstorming together for how this is going to work. Again, becoming no surprise, we're going to need to figure out how to have long-term agreements, both with all of our stakeholders, but also the land partners to be able to enhance these offerings and really to provide, figure out a way to provide a public benefit so that all the constituents can be able to use this. And again, we do realize that this is an quote unquote interim use, but in the interim world for Navy, if that's 10, 15 years, that's great. That's a lifetime for AV. So I think it aligns very, very well with what we're trying to accomplish. Next slide. Okay, Matt. Oh, is that your slide? Yep, I think I finished this one. This is, it wouldn't be a presentation without here are obstacles that we have to go through. I think the key one is really number 3. It's around if we do this right, we need to coordinate the timing of all the conveyances with all of our land partners. We need to make sure that we're in lockstep with them so that we don't do anything to screw up their conveyance, that we don't do anything to jeopardize how the Navy is going to transfer this land over, and that we can come to mutually beneficial solutions so that something we do today can benefit the master developer, something that we do today can develop county staff with sheriff and fire, something we do today can benefit all the work that CCTA is doing on next generation transportation initiatives. So I think we've established a terrific working relationship. We have a tremendous amount of transparency on it. And I think that's really gonna be the key piece as we coordinate, again, all of the moving pieces into creating, again, a world-class test bed. So with that, Jack, I will turn it back to you. Thank you very much. All right, thank you, Matt. So as Matt mentioned, so we're looking to expand our partnerships with our governmental agencies. The City of Concord, as most of you know, that they're in negotiations with a new developer. So that will, we need to work closely with them. On the East Bay Regional Park, which is now the Thorogood Marshall Regional Park, one of their main asks. So we're working on an agreement, and we plan on having it done, bringing it to the board this year. And one of the improvements they want to see is the Bailey Road improvements. So the park is also south of Bailey Road. We don't test there, but they would like us to make improvements there so they can get in and out of that park a little bit safer than what's existing out there today. And then with the county, the Byron Airport, Buchanan Airport, we want to expand the Gomentum Station program to include those 2 airports. And that will give us some more drone testing capability and also a skid pad area. And then also we're working at the Gomentum Station. The county is going to get quite a large portion, and we want to work with the police and fire on a first responder training center. Next slide, please. So again, the goals at Gomentum Station are reduce congestion using new technology, not building roads, create jobs, economic development, improve safety, improve the environment. We're also looking at maybe a permanent innovation center with Oracle. And one of the keys about Gomentum Station is that our location is close to the Silicon Valley, and that is ideal. Next slide, please. So thank you, and that concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Matt. And as a member of the APC committee, thank you for incorporating some of the feedback that we provided, and particularly also looking forward to that, continuing to work together on strategic planning and aligning the partnership, but appreciate the partnership as it is now. Are there any questions or comments from authority board members? And I'm not seeing any hands raised. It was such a wonderful presentation. And then Terry Ann, do we have any written comments?
No written public comment.
Okay, and any members of the public who would like to speak to this item, please raise your hand. I don't see any hands raised, and I know that most of our public speakers are not shy. So I'll thank you again for the presentation, and we will move on to the next agenda item. But very exciting, looking forward. I know we're all coming out on tours in the next couple of weeks or so, or some people may have been in the last week, but we're looking forward to that. So thank you. And now we'll move on to the next agenda item, which will be presented by Terry Ann Grover, and it is an action item regarding the approval of a First Amendment to the employment agreement with our Executive Director, Timothy Hale.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Mine's going to be short and sweet, and I'm going to simply just read the recommendation. The Chair seeks Authority Board approval of the First Amendment to the Authority's employment agreement with Timothy Hale, the Executive Director, which will adjust his compensation to $286,200 per year effective July 1st, 2021, and the term of the amendment will remain through December 27th, 2023. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from
The staff
Authority
recommendation.
Board members? Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comments?
We have not.
And are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this item? I'm not seeing any hands raised either. Are you, are you, Terry?
No hands raised.
Okay, so Commissioner Hudson had a motion.
Second, White.
I heard Commissioner White, and so we have a motion by Commissioner Hudson, a second by Commissioner White. And so Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Yes. Commissioner Butt?
Yes.
Commissioner Glover?
Yes.
Commissioner Askew?
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson?
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes.
Commissioner Thor?
Aye.
Commissioner White?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Chair Geringer?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnrich absent.
Thank you. And thank you, Terry Ann, for conducting the roll call vote. And thank you, Timothy Hale, for all the work that you've been doing. And so we are unanimous in that vote. We will now move on to the next two items on the agenda, and these are action items, and they'll be presented by Ivan Ramirez one at a time as part of the State Route 4 Mokelumne Bike Trail Pedestrian Overcrossing Project. The first item is seeking approval of an amendment to the agreement with Mark Thomas and Company for design services during construction. Ivan, take it away.
Good evening, Chair and board members. My name is Ivan Ramirez, and I'm the Director of Construction. And this is an action item with staff seeks authorization for the Chair to execute Amendment Number 5 to Agreement Number 358 with Mark Thomas in the amount of $69,297 for a new total agreement value of $1,032,204 to provide design services during construction, and to allow the Executive Director designate to make any non-substantive changes to the language. This amendment will extend the agreement termination date from December 31st, 2021 to June 30, 2023. And what this amounts to, commissioners and chair, is that the designer of record is Mark Thomas. They completed the design. We're moving over to the construction phase, and the design team is going to need their support to bring it to completion. So I am open to any questions.
Okay, and are there any questions or comments of the authority board? Seeing just shaking of heads, do we have any written comments, Terry Ann?
No written public comment.
Okay, any members of the public wish to speak to this item?
No public comment.
Okay.
Madam
thank you.
Chair, I would move the item.
Thank you, Commissioner Glover.
I will second.
It's second by Commissioner Haskew. Terry Ann, will you please conduct the roll call vote?
Commissioner Butt,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnrich absent.
Great, thank you very much. And Ivan, we will now move on to the second item, which will be seeking approval to award a construction contract and establish a construction allotment for the project. Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Staff seeks approval of Resolution 2141P, which will award construction contract number 561 to Joseph Albanese as the lowest responsible bidder, submitting a responsive bid in the amount of $7,716,899.30 for construction services. Establish a total construction allotment of $8,626,589.23, which includes a 10% contingency, and authorize the executive director or designee to shift funds between construction allotment categories as long as the total expenditures do not exceed the total amount for the construction allotment. So commissioners, on June 29th of 2021, we released the bid documents to the public. We did issue 4 addendums. Many questions came in that needed us to respond in writing. We opened bids on August 19th, 2021. Again, using YouTube. We had nobody present. Everybody was able to watch the bid opening remotely. And we received 11 bidders, which is a significant amount, considering that it was a $7.8 million project, as the engineer's estimate. We have issued the notice of intent to award, and we did not receive any protest to staff recommendations to award the contract to Joseph Albanese. And so with that, I am open to any questions.
Do we have any, I see Commissioner Glover's hand raised, and if any others would like to speak, please raise your hand. Commissioner Glover?
No, I'm ready to make the motion.
Oh, okay. Terry Ann, did we have any written public comment?
No written public comment.
Are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this item?
Somebody's got a hand raised. One.
Actually,
Commissioner Glover,
it is
yeah.
Commissioner Glover standing by, ready to move the item. So seeing no public comment, I will take the motion from Commissioner Glover. Is there a second?
Hudson, second.
Okay, and Commissioner Hudson, second. Terry Ann, will you conduct the roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Butt,
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew. I see you're nodding your head, yes.
And I'm saying yes too.
Thank you. Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnrich absent.
Great, thank you very much. And Ivan, thank you very much for the presentation and for being so very efficient. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which will be agenda item 9, and moving to the planning committee items. The next agenda item is an action item. It'll be presented by Colin Clark, seeking approval of the draft final Contra Costa County-wide transportation safety policy and implementation guide for local agencies. So Colin, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Geringer and committee members, board members. Matt Kelly is going to be running the slides tonight, so thank you to him. This is the summary of the countywide transportation framework, which is within the guide. And we can go to the next slide. So in terms of the background, the 2018 adopted Bike and Ped plan did include a key recommendation to adopt a consistent countywide Vision Zero approach. And the guide was inspired by the Institute of Transportation Engineers core elements for Vision Zero communities. In 2020, MTC adopted Resolution 4400 with a regional policy, and there's a regional active transportation plan that's underway by MTC, which will help revise the complete streets policy from 2006 that will address safety. Next slide. So one of the, Matt. So one of the key things in terms of the systemic approach, the safe systems approach that the Federal Highway Administration recommends, it originated in Scandinavia. It's been adopted in several other countries and several other public agencies throughout the United States. It takes a holistic approach to designing transportation systems to minimize the rate and severity of collisions and make any collisions that do occur less harmful and medically manageable. So efforts include reducing speeds by redesigning intersections and corridors to protect more vulnerable road users. So shared responsibility is the first step. Next click. So human error is assumed to be inevitable. And so the idea is to design to accommodate for it. Next click. The fatalities are preventable, and making injuries medically manageable is possible. Next click. And so the focus is on eliminating fatal and severe injury collisions so that impacts on the human body are less than severe. Next slide. So after looking at 10 years of data with the help from our consultants, Fair and Peers, 2008 through 2017, the collision data in the pedestrian priority areas defined by the Bike Ped plan shows that people walking and biking represent 20% of all collisions, but 38% of severe injuries and fatalities. Collisions involving people walking or biking are 2.5 times more likely to result in a fatality or severe injury. Next slide. So the collision patterns that were found common countywide in that 10-year period included speeding, transit priority areas, which is why it's so important for BART to be a collaborator with CCTA and local agencies, in addition to the trail crossings you see on the top right in terms of East Bay Regional Park District. And two common groups in terms of vulnerable populations that were found were seniors and youth, and highway interchanges. So it's important to coordinate with Caltrans as well. Next slide. So this shows generally what the peripheral vision of a person driving looks like and how it changes at different speeds, and the likelihood of a potential severe injury versus fatality. Next slide. The speed is the #1 factor in determining the likelihood of surviving a collision when it comes to people walking and biking. And so you'll see that nationwide, there's a big trend in a lot of cities to reduce 25-mile-per-hour posted speed limits to 20 miles per hour so that they're more medically manageable. Next slide. One of the things that comes out of this guide is a toolbox of safe system strategies. And so the guide includes an appendix of this toolbox with a number of different quick build and lower cost possibilities to improve safety and leveraging the already existing design guidelines that are part of the bike and ped plan as well. Next slide. There's a lot of co-benefits of, next slide. There's a lot of co-benefits as it relates to investing in bicycling and walking type projects, because the interest of concerned population, something like half of the population, does have a huge opportunity for mode shift. And the data nationwide shows that trips that are less than 3 miles each are almost half of vehicle congestion. So next slide. The next steps for the local agencies, if the guide is adopted, is to work on local road safety plans and local prioritization of projects and development of projects. And the local road safety plan will help local agencies be more competitive and more eligible for future funding opportunities, including the Highway Safety Improvement Program from the Federal Highway Administration. And with that, I'll take any questions. Next slide.
Great, thank you for that report, Colin. Are there any comments or questions from authority board members? Commissioner Butt.
What's the application of this?
What do you mean by the application?
For whose use is it intended, and how does it get there?
Sure. It's for local agency staff, so planning staff, public works staff, engineers, policymakers, elected officials, and it's about 30-40 pages, the guide itself, and then the appendix, which includes the toolbox, for example, that is in addition and meant for more technical subject matter experts.
So do you have a process for distributing it and maybe providing workshops for local agencies?
Yeah, so Dave Campbell from Bike East Bay is working on a potential collaboration across jurisdictions, Bay Area wide or East Bay wide, in terms of a training opportunity that would allow local staff to swap best practices and lessons learned in terms of what's worked on the ground, for example, as it relates to protected bikeways.
Okay, thank you.
So I see that Commissioner Hudson's hand is up.
Yeah, actually, when I read this, I thought this was just part of the ongoing ABAG MTC plan. I think we had 10 items that we were seeking in our vision for, and one of them was 0 fatalities back when Steve Heminger was there. I think this is just expanding on that, where every city's going to have it as part of their, our melded transportation, housing, whatever we're calling that thing now, one Bay Area. But I'm hoping that's what it's going towards, because we're going to have to put something down on paper that we're using towards doing that. Or am I just making something up?
Yeah,
Colin didn't say anything, so I'm just making it up.
No, you're definitely not making it up. It's really already happening in terms of the policies in place for funding opportunities at the state and federal levels. For example, they're already over the last couple of years requiring an adopted Vision Zero action plan or local road safety plan that helps determine eligibility for these grant applications, for example.
Okay, And before I open for public comment, are there any other authority board members who might have public comments? So I did have a question, sort of piggybacking on Commissioner Butt's question. So, and I see Dave is here and he'll speak to the outreach or the training opportunities that we're partnering with. Will CCTA staff provide technical assistance to cities and city staff through maybe the regional transportation commissions or something like that as we move forward? Because I know some cities, are considering how to incorporate this because maybe they aren't as eligible for the grant programs. And so staff time is sometimes limited. So I guess what could CCTA's role be?
Yes. So in terms of the data that was collected and the analysis that was done, we've been coordinating with the RTPCs and the Vision Zero working group to make sure that local staff have access to this data and the database to be able to use it as a starting point so that the wheel doesn't necessarily need to be recreated in terms of taking a snapshot in time for collision data and analysis. For example, if local agencies want to use that as a starting point, that's a huge leg up and first step.
Okay, thank you. So Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comment?
No written public comment.
Okay, and so Dave Campbell, welcome.
Colin, can I clarify, is Dave speaking under public comment or is he part of the presentation?
Oh, thank you.
Public comment.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Just making sure, sorry.
So just
Before
a
I
reminder,
start the timer.
yeah, just a reminder for members of the public that you do have 3 minutes. And so Terry Ann is going to set that. And Dave, please begin.
Dave Campbell, Advocacy Director with Bike East Bay here in support. This Vision Zero process countywide here in Contra Costa County it's really the first more in-depth work I've done on Vision Zero. We have other cities in the East Bay who've gotten involved in Vision Zero, although not a lot. Fremont is probably the city that's most out in front on this. So I hope you'll support this new program. It is part of a local road safety plans that you will be doing, you have to do. It's part of Safe Systems approach to transportation planning, and it's also part of Complete Streets. And so in that sense, it's building off what you're already doing, but it is definitely not a policy or something that is just paperwork. It's much more than that. And, to get towards zero fatalities, I'll just say it up front, we're going to have to make some difficult decisions and some unpopular decisions. Vision Zero is at times about being an unpopular person, but that's what it takes to get us there. And this is the start. This is the principles. This is the data. This is the baseline work. Y'all are all leaders. You know what it's like to be popular. You know what it's like to be unpopular. And this is a little bit of both. So Bike East Bay is here to work with you. And we look forward to that. Rolling up our sleeves and making our streets safer, making them more accessible for everyone, and getting fatalities down to zero.
Yeah, Bill Harrison was the movement on that one. He really got it started out of Fremont.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you both Daves. Thank you, Dave Campbell, for those comments and Dave Hudson for the background information. And again, any other members of the public who would like to speak to this item before we call for a motion? And Terry Ann, I think that Dave, or maybe it's just me, maybe I've changed there we go. Okay, so any other members of the public who wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to, excuse me, I'll go back to that.
I'll move resolution 21-40-G.
Thank you, Dave. Commissioner.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Haskew seconds. Terry Ann, will you please conduct a roll call vote?
It's Commissioner Butt.
Yes.
Commissioner Glover.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnridge absent.
Thank you. And thank you, Terry Ann, and thank you, Colin, for the presentation, and look forward to the partnerships as we move forward. And the next item on the agenda is an action item that will be presented by Peter Engel, and he will be providing a status update on the implementation of the Contra Costa Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan and seek approval of the task force representative composition. So Peter, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, Chair Geringer and commissioners. Peter Engel, CCTA staff. As Chair Geringer said, this is primarily an update on the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan Task Force, and what we're doing is we're moving forward to implementation of the ATSP. We are in the process of putting together the task force. As what's represented in your board packet, there's several members that have been appointed. There's still a few seats that we are looking to fill. My partner in crime from the county, John Cunningham, had to drop off. He wasn't feeling well, so he dropped off the meeting, but he and I are working diligently to get meetings with prospective members of the task force to just bring them up to date. We did have a few issues with members of the Policy Advisory Committee during the study that people didn't contribute or weren't able to really follow through with their commitments. So we wanted to be a little bit more diligent in talking to folks in advance of the actual task force and making sure that people knew what they were getting into. So I'm still in the process of filling some of those seats. At this point, we anticipate the first task force meeting to be about the middle of October. We wanted to do it in advance of that, but we didn't want to have a meeting when we had only half the seats filled. So that didn't make a lot of sense. So our consultant, Nelson Nygaard, is putting together a welcome packet for task force members to help introduce them to the work that's been done to date and kind of what the expectations are on being on the task force. And so we will make that available to all the members once that's done and get that first meeting scheduled. Other items, we did make a presentation to the county regarding a Measure X request for funds of $1.4 million. We believe that request was well received. And we hope that as the Board of Supervisors gets their recommendation from the committee, Measure X committee, that they will look highly on funding at least this first year of projects and moving forward with the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan. So we're very excited about that. Other than that, your action item tonight is to approve the composition, which I think you've seen a couple times in these meetings of just what the task force is going to be. And then John and I will continue to talk to folks to have them fill those seats. So that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter. And thank you to John publicly, and hope that he feels better. But I know that the two of you have been working very hard on this. So Terry Ann, first, authority board members, do we have any comments or questions for Peter before we move to public comment? Seeing none. Terry Ann, did we receive any written public comment ahead of the meeting?
No written public comment.
Okay, thank you. And are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this item? You can raise your hand and we will give you 3 minutes or up to. Okay, I don't see anyone. Do you, Terry Ann?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you. So do I have a motion to approve the representative composition of the task force as provided in Table A of the staff report?
Second Hudson.
Okay, and so tonight our tag team, we have Commissioner Haskew with the motion and Commissioner Hudson with the second. Terry Ann, will you please conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Butt?
Yes.
Commissioner Glover,
Yes.
Commissioner Haskew,
Yes.
Commissioner Hudson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Nowak,
Yes.
Commissioner Thorpe,
Aye.
Commissioner White,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Chair Geringer.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Arnridge absent.
Great. Thank you, Terry Ann, and thanks again for the work and the report, Peter. So we'll move on to agenda item number 10. We have for correspondence and communications, we do not have any this evening. You will find for agenda item number 11, your committee reports are provided in the packet. We will move on to agenda item 12, authority board and staff comments, first with chair comments and reports. I do not have a chair report. I do just want to thank everyone for the work tonight on the meeting. And particularly, I do want to thank staff because I know between the APC and the planning committee meetings that this meeting, the agenda was well thought out because this meeting could have been even longer, 3 or 4 hours. So I really want to thank the staff for all the work that they did behind the scenes to make it as efficient as possible. So moving on to agenda item 12B, do we have any comments or updates from commissioners? And I see Commissioner Hudson swimming or wiggling his fingers as he's.
I don't know. I think I moved that picture.
He's in the mountains now.
Yeah, I'm in the mountains now.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Karen Mitchoff and I attended an air district meeting this morning, and it was weird when they said we were going to have this special meeting. It was basically 5G, and then the actual request is targeting emission reductions from single occupancy driving, flex your commute, and expanded broadband internet. They didn't even mention 5G. But anyway, we kicked $250,000 into some commute program for develop. Basically because Lindsay wrote a tremendous letter and strong-armed us into to approving the thing. What has me a little bit concerned is that it makes us file a motion for party status with the California Public Utilities Commission, which doesn't bother me, but I'm reading that there's an initiative to break up the PUC. So I would just ask that somebody on staff take a look at that just in case it does make it. I'm not holding my breath that it does, but what new cell we would be in should the PUC cease to be there next year and all the things we're doing with Innovate 680.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners have reports that they would like to give? Any representatives who would like to provide an update, please raise your hand. Turn on your screen, turn on your video. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 12C, to our executive staff comments. So Executive Director Hale.
Thank you very much, Chair Geringer and Commissioners. Usually August is a dark month for our staff, and I think August was probably the busiest month we've had this entire year so far. It's been pretty crazy. There's a lot going on. I wish I could tell you all about it, but feel free to give me a call if you want to talk more. But it's our staff has been working really busy, really productively and efficiently, all working from home. We continue to be extremely efficient. And one of the things we actually just did is we actually calculated how much vehicle miles traveled that we're actually saving by working from home. And so right now we're saving about 13,000 vehicle miles traveled per month just by working from home. And I think that really meets our goals and objectives as an agency to really help meet our greenhouse gas emissions. And it really kind of sets the model, for potentially other agencies. And so I think also, we continue to be an employer choice as well as an employee choice. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware, we just recently advertised for an administrative assistant. It's only been out on the street for maybe a couple of weeks now, and we have 173 applications for this administrative assistant. So everyone wants to come work for CCTA. Everyone wants to work with CCTA. Apparently, Ivan gave a great presentation about Mokelumne Bridge. Got 11 bids. The bid came under budget. And talking with other agencies, they're not seeing that same trend. And as well as you can see, there's a lot going on at Gomentum Station. Chair Geringer mentioned it, but we're all coordinating with all of you to get you out there for a tour at Gomentum, get a ride on the shared autonomous vehicle, as well as the new glideways, the glide car. And with Gomentum Station, I think you all know this, but our reputation just continues to precede us. We just recently met with Hitachi, who's a massive global technology innovative partner, and we're just starting to discuss a partnership with them, and in terms of forming some projects and grant funding around that. And we also, Kaiser Permanente Health, I mean, they reached out to us and they really wanted to seek our input about transportation and how we can do a better job of integrating, innovative mobility options into the health system, which we're already doing as part of the automated driving system grant. And we continue to work towards better transit. We met with our 11 transit operators. I know you've heard a lot about this integrated transit plan that we're developing. And we met with 11 transit operators that touch Contra Costa County, as well as the 2 rail operators. And we have their entire full support to moving forward with this integrated transit plan. And so Peter and I are working right now, moving forward the funding with that plan. We also met with Assembly Member Bauer Cajon and Grayson and Senator Glazer to discuss future state funding for transportation. And I'm sure you've heard about the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program and kind of what's happening there with the new general funds. And so those conversations have kind of been put on hold between the governor and the legislature. And so we're actually going to be seeing a regular $1 billion cycle for TRCP here upcoming. And that's really important to us in terms of our 680 express bus service. We also introduced the dynamic personal micro transit and glideways to Senator Padilla and Congressman DeSaulnier, and also shared with them what we're doing with the 680 express bus and all the work we're doing around shared mobility hubs. And then finally, just want you to know that, as the governor's executive order, and we'll see what happens in the next few days with knowing the results of the recall, but and obviously potentially AB 361, we are anticipating having an in-person meeting in October for the full authority board, where the committee meetings, APC and PC, will most likely be virtual. And so we are going to be sending out just a brief survey to all of you to make sure we have a safe and a safe meeting in October with all of you here in person. And so more to come on that. Stay tuned, and I'm sure Terry Ann will be sharing some information with you here shortly. So that concludes my update.
Great, thank you, Tim. So any questions of the executive director?
Got one. How much does that ollie weigh?
Ollie, it weighs, I think, about 5,000 pounds.
Thought it was on that. Great. Okay, great. Thank you. So agenda item 13, calendar, they're all in the packet. And we will now move on to convene into closed session for a conference with legal counsel on existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 for the case of Contra Costa Transportation Authority versus East Bay Municipal Utility District, case number CIVMSC 20-00719. And I will let Terry Ann lead us in the logistics of moving to closed session.
Okay, I have all of the commissioners and Tim Hale, Hisham Noemi, and David McRae assigned to a breakout room. So I'll go ahead and open that now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just making sure it worked, Terry Ann, but since
what's that?
I said I was just making sure your breakout rooms worked and I didn't end up anywhere I wasn't supposed to. So I'm gonna hop off since who knows how long this is going to be till they pop back out.
Oh, that was weird. Hold on.
Okay.
Into open session, and I will announce that there's no reportable action from the closed session, and with thanks to staff and to all of the Authority Board commissioners and representatives, this meeting is adjourned until our meeting on October 20th, 2021. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night.